it is appearing uh, appearing as a being a separate is appearing due to ignorance. So the first job of purification is to understand that the objects that seem to be there have never really been there. And that we understand, as the text explains, let me come to the text, that we understand either that we understand uh, either by uh, the gross mind, that the objects are not there. We understand that the text says we understand that the objects are illusionary when we take the when we understand that when we take the object as being really there, it will increase, the text says, the vasanas of thinking, the impregnation of mind by thinking. And because of this impregnation of the mind by thinking, hmm, we uh, don't uh, uh, when we investigate that it is illusionary, we will see that it is actually a result of the karmic consciousness. And this brings us to the knowledge, to the subtle knowledge, that the knowledge of the manas, that from the karmic consciousness arises the evolving consciousness, from evolving consciousness, revealing consciousness. Then, because the objects are revealed, hmm, then we identify with the differentiating consciousness and continuity of consciousness. This is a subtle aspect of understanding the uh, uh, the permeation or the cohabitation, as they sometimes, or the vasanas of gochara by subtle mind. But we also understand when we are bodhisattvas, realized bodhisattvas, we understand in this way. So we don't take this gochara to be true. Now, in our case, we understand by correct differentiation, by thinking, and then this uh, we understand that when we hold these objects to be real, this is in our case, then what will happen? Then, when we grasp to this object, we grasp actually to these names of this object. These are the gross types of consciousnesses. We have learned the consciousness qi, zhi, zhi, qi, xiang, the consciousness which attaches to the object, and consciousness which attaches to the object, creating the concepts and getting involved in the concepts and believing these concepts to be true. Hmm? So arises in us even the differentiating mind can see it, even the beginning, a bodhisattva based on faith can see it, even the uh, the disciple who has advanced in Vipassana, who has a correct differentiate, can see it. When he clings to the object, then he will create the uh, Trishna, which is the I, uh, the attachment, and he will create wrong views. And this attachment and wrong views will harm him. So that's why he comes through correct differentiation also to the understanding that he should not hold to the object. Hmm? When he holds to the object, he is influenced by the uh, uh, the cohabitation or permeation by ignorance. And when he is permeated by ignorance, uh, the gross mind creates grasping and new uh, new concepts due to grasping, and uh, mm, this is for correct differentiation. It is suffering. But when our mind becomes more subtle, then we understand that uh, this karmic consciousness is not true. So we cannot uh, rely on thinking, because the karmic consciousness is what moves the mind. When the mind is moved, then it revolves. When it revolves, it reveals. When it reveals, it feels. When it feels, it has continuity. We cannot have a continuity of the mind without feeling. And when we uh, understand that this feeling is emptiness, the object of feeling is emptiness, as the Heart Sutra explains, the form is emptiness, body is emptiness, and the feelings are emptiness, the perceptions are emptiness. They are not different from emptiness. When we understand that, then we come to the subtle understanding that the objects uh, are not true. When we use the six consciousnesses, we understand that we should not hold to the objects, because they holding to the object causes suffering. But we don't yet really penetrate that the subtle consciousness, which makes us realize that thinking is illusionary. Hmm? That I think we have explained the last time. Then, when we understand the illusionary nature of the objects, then we come to the illusionary nature of the mind. And this illusionary nature of the mind, the text explains also, is uh, the illusion of the mind we understand also by the subtle consciousness, which is primary. Understanding by subtle consciousness is primary. That is understanding that the root ignorance comes from karmic consciousness, which causes a movement of the mind. And so when we understand it, we are enlightened. But still, uh, being enlightened, we cannot help thinking. Being in the world, we still think. Therefore, we are even the enlightened person, enlightened bodhisattva, is still subjected to the. Uh, he has penetrated the samskara dukkha, that all the uh, compounded is connected to dukkha. Dukkha, we can say pain, but pain of clinging to existence. but he cannot get rid of the viparinama dukkha, as the commentaries say, of the dukkha from change, because in order to live, we have to think, and think is a change. And even when we become arahats, when we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we still have to think. And for a sensitive mind, thinking is also kind of uh, unpleasant state, but the bodhisattva receives it because of the great compassion. He does not want to be separated from the beings. So he accepts this viparinama dukkha, the dukkha of change, until he has completely removed this karmic consciousness, which is the primary cause of ignorance. Now, we also understand the mind or thinking being illusionary by the that which arises from the organ of thinking or from manas, and these are the six consciousnesses we have explained. These consciousnesses is, the text explains, is the uh, the common man is has a bondage of karma. So he is subjected to clinging and wrong views, and uh, with this kind of understanding of the illusionary nature of the thought, he uh, uh, he can understand uh, that this bondage and creating new karma the is brings suffering, but he cannot understand that in order to get rid of this vicious circle of samsara, which uh, is based on ignorance, he has to penetrate that all thinking, no matter whether good thinking or bad thinking, all thinking is rooted in ignorance. So primary ignorance, the subtle mind can understand. The secondary ignorance, the differentiating mind can understand. And this understanding will not be complete in the sense that it will not lead him to the ultimate realization. Ultimate realization in this tradition is the supreme Buddhahood. So then next comes the understanding. So we have a process. First, understanding the illusionary nature of objects, then illusionary nature of the mind which sees the object, then illusionary nature of ignorance itself. Hmm? If ignorance was real, then no way to uh, realize anything. So the understanding that the root of the mind which moves is the ignorance. That is the third level uh, of understanding how the impure dharma deprives us of the real state. Hmm? The real state is in the beginning there was nothing real. There is something real, something because of the connection with the ignorance. So in the end, we have to come to the understanding that the ignorance is also has no root in reality whatsoever. But first, we have to understand that objects are illusionary, then that the thinking is illusionary, and then that ignorance is illusionary. Hmm? Then, uh, so if we understand it, then we can come, as the text we will now see in the text, we will come to the uh, let's say to understanding that everything arises due to karmic consciousness, and when the karmic consciousness ceases, then nothing really arises in truth. The things arise, but not arise in truth. Hmm? They arise like in a dream. Now we can also understand that this uh, ignorance is true by gross consciousnesses when we understand. Hmm? By the six gross consciousnesses, when we understand that this uh, our views and uh, our uh, attachment, greed, they are harmful, and because they are harmful, we want to uh, abandon them, and when we abandon them, then we can abandon ignorance. Hmm? But when we understand it by differentiation, not by understanding the true nature of the mind, we understand it by the, the gross mind, not by subtle mind. Hmm? So we have this, due to ignorance, we are connected with illusionary objects, illusionary mind, and ignorance. Hmm? When we become uh, enlightened bodhisattvas, then we can penetrate the uh, illusionary nature of the objects and illusionary nature of the thinking. But first, we have to understand the illusionary nature of the objects, then illusionary nature of the thinking, and through illusionary nature of the thinking, we can uh, come back to the root of all the trouble, which is ignorance. Hmm? So the primary ignorance produces the uh, the developing consciousness and revealing consciousness. Due to them, we have sensation. Due to sensations, we have continuity. Hmm? And all this uh, comes from the mind. When we don't see it, then we rely on the gross consciousness, which sees the object and the mind as something separate. Hmm? So first, we have to understand that this uh, objects are illusionary, then we can, and we understand it also by, in case of the uh, common understanding, gross understanding, by differentiating mind in terms of the uh, subtle understanding, by the subtle mind, uh, by manas, huh? By organ of thinking, which reveals to us that actually no object really is there. From the very beginning, it was not there. Hmm? So when we understand that no object was there, we understand that there is no real thinking about the objects. When we understand that it is explained very well in Cheng Wei Shalun, when we understand very well that no real objects are there, that no real thinking is there, then we can realize the true nature of the mind. And then we rely in understanding of illusionary nature of the mind, illusionary thinking and illusionary ignorance. We rely on subtle understanding. And this subtle understanding is because we have, uh, say, uh, much deeper penetration by the suchness. And when the suchness removes completely ignorance, we become the Buddhas. Now, he has first explained from again from the end to the beginning. Now he has to explain from the beginning to the end, just like in the first chapter. And I think we have not come yet to it. So let us read it. He says, because there, no, that is, let us come to pure Dharma. So we have explained how these vasanas produce the impure dharmas. That has been explained in the previous lecture. Now we have just summarized, come back to it. We have understood that this uh, ignorance permeates the suchness, and thus uh, this suchness is when it is connected with ignorance, it becomes the five kinds of manas, which we have explained. This uh, karmic mind, this tianfen and xiangfen, the part which sees and the part of the seen. And due to this, the uh, conditioning by differentiation based on feeling and continuity. And that is called manas, the organ of thinking. Hmm? Now, we have the secondary ignorance, which permeates illusionary thinking. And through illusionary thinking, also penetrates the understanding of the object. So, this secondary uh, ignorance, uh, then when it permeates the illusionary thinking, it becomes the discriminating consciousness, or six kinds of consciousnesses, which are gross. And through these gross kinds of consciousnesses, we understand these three levels of uh, the illusionary objects, the illusionary mind, and illusionary ignorance. And we also understand through the subtle mind, which are these five consciousnesses, manas. So on both levels, we understand how the uh, uh, the ignorance permeates our mind, so that we grasp for the object, grasp for the mind, and take the ignorance as something uh, actually which uh, prevents us, which uh, prevents us from seeing suchness as being our true nature. So when we see suchness as being our true nature, automatically we will see the thinking as being illusionary and the objects of being illusionary. And again, By seeing the objects of being illusionary, we will see the thinking as being illusionary. And by knowing thinking as being illusionary, we will know the ignorance as being illusionary, and we can come to the original nature. And this happens on the level of the subtle understanding and also on the level of the more gross understanding by uh, correct differentiation. Now, the opposite side is how do vasanas, that means this habitation, produce non-stop pure dharmas. Hmm? Now, from the other side, the suchness permeates ignorance. When it permeates ignorance, we don't see it as real. When we don't see ignorance as real, we don't see the thinking as real. When we don't see thinking as real, we don't see the object as real. Hmm? Here, because there is the dharma of suchness, it can permeate ignorance. Hmm? If there was no dharma of suchness, it could not permeate the ignorance. So the suchness exists only in relation to the ignorance, and ignorance exists only in the relation to the suchness for us, because we are not yet, we have not yet penetrated one mind. We have not yet penetrated the, so everything is in regard to the other. Huh? So we can only understand the suchness on the base of understanding ignorance, and we can only understand ignorance on the base of understanding suchness. This is the wonderful thing about this scripture, huh? That actually uh, everything is interconnected, and we are always on the crossroad of this interconnection between the opposing dharmas. And because we are in this intersection of the opposing karmas, we are, as all other beings, we are in the alaya consciousness, which connects our enlightened aspect with our non-enlightened aspect. So the text says, due to the strength of the causes and conditions of this permeation, hmm, everything is due to causes and conditions. Nothing appears by itself. Hmm? And we have seen the cause is uh, suchness, which is our true nature, and the conditions are the ignorance. Hmm? Due to causes and conditions being connected, we live in this alaya consciousness where they are connected. So when we understand that we have actually this pure dharmas which permeate the ignorance, and so that we understand our mind as not being, as being illusionary, and what it sees as being illusionary. Hmm? When uh, we understand that, so we become due to this permeation by suchness, everything uh, positive comes from permeation by suchness, everything negative comes from permeation or from cohabitation with ignorance. So the positive things are all due to cohabitation with suchness. Negative things are all due to cohabitation with ignorance. But in the beginning, there was neither ignorance nor suchness as different from ignorance. They became connected in our mind, in our thinking. Beings are, when we understand, the uh, our mind being permeated by suchness, which is our true nature. So we are disenchanted, nirveda, yenli. We are disenchanted in mind from samsara dukkha, uh, from the uh, inconvenience of being subjected to impermanence, which is dukkha, that is samsara dukkha, the dukkha of all the compounded, of all the created. Then we seek happiness in nirvana. Hmm? And this seeking in happiness in nirvana is the uh, direct effect of the Buddha nature, which, according to the Buddhist scriptures, which is effective in all six or five states of existence. So the Buddha nature will manifest even in the hell, even in the hungry ghost realm, even uh, uh, in the divine realms, in human realms, according to our ability of beings uh, to open to it, to receive it. Uh, so when we become disenchanted, as there are causes and conditions for illusionary thoughts to become disenchanted, to become nirvana, to become uh, uh, fed up with uh, the uh, sorrowful nature of being connected with impermanence, which even the uh, the arahats cannot uh, be freed from, because the samsara, being in the world, is being in impermanence. And as long as we are in the world, we are in the impermanence, because we are connected to the mind, which is impermanent. But this mind, when we uh, have subtle understanding, when we understand that this mind and the uh, forms, they're not separated. When we understand through gross differentiation, we understand that this mind and the forms, they are actually uh, different. So suchness, when suchness permeates the ignorance, this is the uh, base cohabitation. So, uh, but when suchness permeates ignorance, then it's the strength of suchness will increase. So it will permeate the ignorance, and we become uh, disenchanted from our state of samsaric existence, and we turn to suchness by first by faith, and eventually by more and more understanding. The faith is still uh, gross understanding. So now we come to the process of uh, liberation due to the uh, the Buddha nature or due to the suchness permeating the ignorance. So when the suchness permeates the ignorance, even when we are studying according to this tradition, there is actually only one yana. So when we, uh, even when we uh, study the path of the disciples, eventually we will have to come to the source, which is suchness. So if there is confidence in one's nature, one's nature being uh, the emptiness and luminosity, which is inherent in emptiness and which reveal the objects. So this is when we practice on the base of faith or on the base of correct differentiation. So we turn away from nirvana and we want to realize, turn away from samsara and we want to realize nirvana, either by correct differentiation or by faith in our enlightened nature, because we give rise to the bodhicitta. Then, when one relies on correct thinking, as we have said, the correct differentiation, or when one relies on the faith in our own true nature, we have explained before, in the practice of faith, already all the good qualities that the Shravaka develops, the mindfulness, the right effort, the uh, awareness, the doing the good deeds, the learning, Bahushrutata, learning much about the way the dharmas are, that there is no self, that there is actually only the momentary appearance of the phenomena. Hmm? This Shravaka also understands, the one who has faith, practices faith, and has deep experience in practice of faith, understands this also. So one knows that the mind's movement is illusionary, as there is no real uh, gochara, no real objects there in front of the mind. Hmm? So here, actually, we have, as in Uttara Tantra Shastra, we have the only practice of the Bodhisattva is a real practice, one yana. First, we practice by, so three levels of practice. We practice by faith. When we realize the faith, we start to understand the true nature of the mind. When we understand the true nature of the mind, we can uh, we can proceed to a partial understanding of the our true nature. When we realize our true nature, that there is, when we realize directly there is no true object and no true subject, then we work with the subtle understanding, hmm, which brings also the Sambhogakaya, the body of enjoyment, into the picture. So the luminosity of the mind reveals the subtle objects. And thus one cultivates aloofness from Dharma, says the text. So what does it mean? One who has faith in bodhicitta, he practices the uh, the paramis, so he does not want to uh, gather from himself. He rather has pleasure in giving. He does not take pleasure in accumulating for himself. So he practices the dwellings in the bodhicitta, the practice according to the bodhicitta, the paramis. Then uh, he practices the 10 practices of uh, punya parinama, of giving everything uh, for the beings, not guarding anything for oneself, because one understands that uh, mind and objects are actually suchness. When he understands this, then he understands knowing according to truth. So he has the direct knowledge of the non-duality. Direct knowledge of the non-duality is a knowledge according to the truth in this tradition. But the explanation is exactly same like in the practice of the Shravaka. When we become enlightened bodhisattvas, what will happen? We see, just like it is said, when we realize the entry into the stream, so the uh, wind takes away the cloud hiding the full moon, but it only takes it for a short moment. But even so, it is for a short moment, it will completely uh, change our behavior, our achara. We will not anymore uh, try to grasp for oneself. We will try to uh, get rid of the self, get rid of the grasping. Hmm? Whether it be for the sake of uh, going to nirvana or for the sake of uh, being revealed our true nature, which is actually the only nature. There is no other nature, and which is non duality. In it, we can understand that the nirvana and samsara is also like everything else, only uh, in mutual relation. To be in mutual relation, it appears to be, but is neither real existence nor real non-existence. Not real existence because it is emptiness, not real non-existence because it illumines the true nature of the things. So when we understand there is no real object before us, we also understand that there is no real thinking about the object. Then we have the Zhu Shi Quan, understanding according to truth, Yatha Bhuta Jnana. And so we attain what is called in Bodhisattva Pasi Pramudita Bhumi, which is very difficult to attain, much more difficult than to attain the stream entry. When we attain it, so the mind opens to, it is said, the mind opens so that we see according uh, to the sutra, Dashabhumika Sutra, Sutra of the 10 bhumis, we see 100 world system and 100 kinds of samadhis and so on. It has incredible power, which increases as we continue in the uh, practice of the paramis. So when we have attained this pramudita bhumi, the CT, the stage of rejoicing at the true nature of our mind, which can never leave us. So we are not subjected anymore to depressions, worries, fears. So this brings a great joy into the mind. But in order to be always in this full moon of our nature, we have to continue, as the text say, using all kinds of skillful means. So that means in the second bhumi, he masters, first bhumi, he masters giving because he knows there is nothing to take because the true nature of reality is suchness. In suchness, there is nothing to add to it, there is nothing to take away from it. And that is a true function of the suchness. We will come to it in our text also, what has the nature and characteristic must have also function. And the function of the suchness is, is that nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken away from it. When we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we are never separated from this nature of the suchness. So we know to this mind really and to our experience, nothing can be added, nothing can be taken away from it in order to realize it so that the influence of ignorance does not appear. We have to master the other paramis. So according to Bodhisattva Bhumis and the parami of Shila in the second bhumi, parami of samadhi in the third bhumi, and the parami of wisdom in the other bhumis, which implies then when the six implies also the skillful means, the powers, and the true knowledge, which is free from all influences of ignorance. So enable his practice to conform to suchness when we have understood that the true reality is suchness and it can never be separated from us, that actually there is nothing except suchness, to which nothing can be added, from which nothing can be taken away. So this suchness, because nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken away from it, it does not grasp, and it also does not need to think. The suchness does not need to think because it is uh, aware that when you start thinking, then you also start using the karmic consciousness, which is the root of ignorance. But it does not mean that you have stopped thinking. The thinking may still appear. To master the thinking is a long process. So until he removes uh, for long periods of time due to the power of vasanas, of suchness, uh, all uh, all arising of objects and also all arising of illusionary thinking, hmm, he can remove for a long time because he has familiarity when he attained bhumi of the bodhisattva, he has familiarity with the samadhi of suchness. Before attaining the samadhi of suchness, he attains it, but it is not yet uh, the samadhi of suchness which completely uh, uh, change the way of his behavior, the way of his thinking. Only when he has realized the first bhumi, his way of thinking, his way uh, of conduct will be connected always with the wisdom of suchness and with the, as we have learned, with the unthinkable pusaye of suchness. The suchness has unthinkable karma, and the suchness has unthinkable knowledge. This is a characteristic of suchness. So it does not need to uh, uh, any particular attention to understand things. It does not need any investigation to understand things. The things just appear in it as they are. So when his vasanas of taking the true, when he understands the suchness first by faith and by practice of the faith, that means by uh, dwelling in bodhicitta, by uh, behaving according to bodhicitta, by uh, giving his merits from for the sake of all sentient beings, not for the sake of his liberation. So he can eventually approach more and more the samadhi of suchness so that it can completely revolve his way of behavior and his way of thinking. So uh, he will not take this cohabitation with objects as being something real. He will not take this cohabitation with thinking as being something real. And he will not take the ignorance as being something real. So he becomes uh, uh, not a bodhisattva by determination, he becomes a bodhisattva by realization. That is, this differentiation is there in scriptures, bodhisattva by differentiation, and bodhisattva, real bodhisattva, by realization. So when we become the bodhisattvas by realization, we get the same what is explained in the path of the disciples. We get uh, the marga phala. Marga phala means the uh, the 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 fruit of the path. When we see nirvana as something as different from samsara, which we uh, want to abandon by penetrating the truth of samsara, by true thinking, true understanding, then uh, we we become enlightened Shravaka. When we become enlightened Shravaka, what is the nature of enlightened disciple? If we become enlightened disciples, we can at any time we want, we can go into the samadhi of Marga Phala. We can go to the samadhi of the fruit of the path, so that we are connected with nirvana. Whenever we wish, if you want to test if you are a real realized disciple or not a real realized disciple, if you are a real realized disciple, as soon as you decide, you are in the samadhi of nirvana. So nirvana as object different from samsara, from the compounded, appears immediately to your mind. When you are a realized bodhisattva, not the nirvana as being something opposed to samsara, hmm, immediately, whenever you want, appears to your mind, but the suchness as being the only true reality in which there are no true objects, there are no true thoughts, and uh, there is no true ignorance, also appears immediately to your mind. You don't need to wait. So even so, this realization, as Visuddhimagga describes, is like the full moon being uh, for a short time revealed by the wind removing the clouds. This is the same simile which comes in Mahayana, also in Theravada. But the object of realization is not nirvana as opposed to samsara, because it is a non-dualistic realization. The object of realization is the samadhi of suchness. To the samadhi of suchness, you have nothing to add, you have nothing to take away, and in it, all the objects appear just as suchness as well, because there is only one suchness, there is only one mind. As we have seen, our text starts from this premise: there is only one mind, there is only one suchness, there is only uh, one Buddha nature, and that is our true nature. Now we are uh, separated from our true nature by ignorance, and as the power of ignorance decreases, the power of suchness increases. As the power of suchness increases, the power of ignorance decreases. So, uh, so when the power of ignorance decreases, then we can penetrate the subtle consciousness, the manas, and we understand that the mind which moves and which sees the object as something being separate from it is a completely illusionary. When we understand that, we also understand that the ignorance is completely illusionary. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of suchness, of the true nature of the mind. And this true nature of the mind is same for all beings. That's why the text starts that Dharma is nothing but this one mind. In this one mind uh, appear the influences of ignorance and appear the influences of suchness. When the influence of suchness appears, the ignorance of uh, the influence of ignorance is weakened. When the influence of suchness appears, the ignorance is weakened. When the ignorance uh, power of ignorance appears, the suchness is weakened, and we are on the crossroad. And this happens moment by moment, because the mind happens moment by moment. Thinking happens moment by moment. But since it happened moment by moment, it cannot have uh, uh, any true self-existent nature except the suchness itself. As thoughts do not arise, that means what means do not arise? Do not arise as something real, because we understood that the uh, thoughts are not real. Automatically, the gochara, the objects as being something there, also stops in its turn. So when we understand that the thoughts are in the middle, when we understand that the thoughts are not real, and that we understand uh, thoroughly only when we have the bodhisattva realization, then automatically the uh, the gocharas, the objects will not be there. They stop simply. So we are just in mind. To realize the mind means to realize that there is nothing except the mind in this tradition. And the Vasubandhu says in the or the Xuanzang explains in the Cheng Wei Shalun that that Vasubandhu explains that the only the Buddha himself has a privilege of understanding the mind only thoroughly. Even when we become enlightened bodhisattvas, we understand only partially. We have learned it in the first chapter. Huh? When we become realized bodhisattvas, we have the partial understanding of suchness, the partial understanding of the true nature of the mind. But we have not yet understand the complete. We have not yet come to the beginning. And thoughts do not arise. So that means that when we penetrate the illusionary nature of the thoughts, for that we have to have very deep realization. Then automatically the idea that there is any object there apart from the mind will disappear automatically. So because the causes and conditions for appearance of any object, any real object, both cease. What is the uh, cause for appearance of the uh, uh, real objects? Hmm? It is, of course, the ignorance. And what are the conditions for the appearing of the real objects? Uh, the believing that the mind, the thinking mind, really exists. So when we know that both the thought are based on ignorance, therefore they don't exist, and what they see, the objects also do not exist, then we can understand that the mind has really no any real characteristics which can be grasped. So our mind makes a revolution. Our alaya consciousness becomes, oh, here is now the Lakshmi Puja. So a lot of artificial fire outside. So Lakshmi Puja is the worship of the goddess of riches, which is now, as a Buddhist, the goddess of riches is the Pragya Paramita, the uh, the great wisdom. So the Chitta Lakshana, the Shin Xiang, that we understand that the true mind has not hmm, any true characteristic. This true characteristic come through the mental factors which make the uh, content of the mind. Hmm? When we understand that the true mind just like a mirror only reflect the reality, then our alaya consciousness become the wisdom of the great mirror, right? Then automatically all the other minds, the manas, huh? uh, the uh, the six consciousness, the five consciousnesses also become wisdom. We have learned that. So all the characteristics of the mind, they become completely illusionary. So when we see them as being illusionary, they are exhausted in the, where are they exhausted? In the samadhi of suchness, which is called attaining nirvana and accomplishing spontaneous acting. Through the samadhi of suchness, we attain the non-dualistic nirvana, and this non-dualistic nirvana is connected with the spontaneous acting. Spontaneous acting is unthinkable acting. Hmm? We will come to it. So the Bodha practice, the Bodhisattva practice, is the practice of the samadhi of suchness. First, we understand it, the samadhi of suchness, by faith. Faith will transform us, or we also understand it by correct differentiation. We have explained, we understand it in a gross way, or we understand it in a more subtle way, until we realize this unthinkable nirvana, non-dualistic nirvana, which is uh, uh, impossible to realize through any thinking, and uh, which is accompanied by spontaneous acting, ziranye. So the in this way, uh, our mind will dwell in a suchness, will be permeated deeply by suchness. And when we permeate it by suchness, we will know that whatever mind moves is an illusionary mind, and what illusionary mind sees is illusionary objects. And when we understand that, we will also understand that our ignorance penetrating the true nature of our mind, which is suchness, is also uh, completely illusionary. So one becomes disillusioned from dualism, again by the same understanding that there is um, no true nature in concepts, no true nature in objects, no true nature whatsoever. And And the differentiation by true nature also is uh, not true because the very nature is uh, is based on the very idea of nature is based on the moving mind, and the nature of the mind is not moving. So when we have vikalpa, when we have differentiation, then we have the idea that there is the uh, the swabhava, the self nature, that this our experience is something different of the outside from the mind, and that the objects that we experience, that this is the compounded object, is something that is there. This will not be there. So the bodhisattva will get completely free of the idea of something uh, has any nature whatsoever. As for the disciple, according to this tradition, he will get rid of the idea that there is a self, there is something belonging to the self, that there is the true, lasting, pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, neither pleasant nor unpleasant sensation. He will also get rid of it, but he will get rid of it by the different, correctly differentiating mind, not by mind by which understand that whatever thought and whatever object of thought appears is by its very definition unreal, but yet that which illumines uh, the objects is there. So we connect it with what has been explained before. First, we get rid of this mind, which is previously was called asamprayukta pushyangin. That is a mind which is not connected with the understanding of the chittamatrata of the mind only. And finally, we get rid of all the mind because we get rid of the ignorance. But we get rid of the ignorance by stages. First, understanding the non-real nature of the mind, which will lead to the understanding that no object is really there. Then neither object nor mind is there, so ignorance will be unreal. And when we understand that the ignorance is unreal, we can step by step realize the true nature of the mind, which is never separated from suchness. So now we have already surpassed the time. Let us continue next week. I hope we will benefit from this bad explanation. I was unable to give a better explanation. This subject matter is not easy to understand, yet I have tried my best. And let us hope something will come out of it. Something will surely come out of it when we investigate more and we connect it with the preceding and we connect it with what follows. So we have to put things together again. We are always on the crossroad. This crossroad is because we are connected with ignorance, because we connected with ignorance, we are uh, on the crossroad. Being in the crossroad is being in our uh, uh, base consciousness, which is the combination of the influence of ignorance and the influence of suchness. It, when the one prevails, then the veil of ignorance becomes thinner. When the other prevails, the suchness, understanding of suchness becomes uh, thinner. Huh? And our job is to, uh, by reasoning, which is always connected with the differentiating consciousness, which believes that something is really there. We cannot help using differentiating consciousness without believing that something is there. But this consciousness is very important, but gross. When we have realized the mind only, then we are connected with the true consciousness, which is suchness, which is much more subtle. Hmm? So we can understand the illusionary nature of objects, which are based on the differentiating six consciousnesses. And then we can also detach completely from the mind, which is by its nature illusionary, and eventually also from ignorance, so as to stay in suchness, which is the uh, aim of the bodhisattva path. So this much for today. Uh, let us transfer merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. We have prolonged our time, but I hope it does not matter, and we will get more and more sense from what is being taught. Mm. And when we get more sense, then we also have more joy in life. That's why the first bhumi of the bodhisattva is called the stage of the joy. Being connected to the suchness is the state of the never ceasing joy. And we work for it by determination, by investigating through our gross mind, and eventually becoming more familiar with the subtle mind, which is able to reveal to us this, as we will learn, these three bodies, which are the object matter of the bodhisattva realization. Om Mitopo. 愿你自贡的普济一切，我等一众生皆空成佛道。May the merit of this practice spread to all beings so that we attain the state of supreme realization, the realization of suchness. Om Mitobo. Okay,